Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Musarrat and you are watching 5 W's of English Literature. Today's caption is what? Students, in this video I will provide you answer of these questions. What are the chief events and features of the age of Chaucer? Or what is the importance of a thorough understanding of an author's age? For a profound and comprehensive study of an author's literary work, discuss in context with the age of Chaucer. Let's start the age of Chaucer under these headings. Introduction. Chaucer's age, both medieval and modern. Chief events and features of the age of Chaucer. The 100 Years' War. The age of chivalry. The Black Death. Peasants' revolt and labor unrest. The Church. The Reform movements. Literary and intellectual tendencies. Conclusion. Students, learn all these headings carefully. After learning these headings, you will be able to attempt these questions. And remember, don't be a rote learner, because you can get good marks in literature only by self-writing. I hope this point will be helpful for your good marks. Introduction. For a profound and comprehensive study of an author's literary work, a thorough understanding of the age which produced and nurtured him is the most essential. Every man is a child of his age. He is influenced by it, though if he is a great man, he may influence it also. A great writer like Shakespeare or Chaucer is generally said to be not of an age, but of all ages. But in spite of his universal appeal, the fact remains that even he could not have escaped the spirit of the age in which he lived and moved and had his being. Emphasizing this point, W.H. Hudson says, every man belongs to his race and age. No matter how marked his personality, the spirit of his race and age finds expression through him. Chaucer's age, both medieval and modern. Chaucer's age, like most historical ages, was an age of transition. This transition implies a shift from the medieval to the modern times, the emergence of the English nation from the Dark Ages to the Age of Enlightenment. Though some elements associated with modernity were coming into prominence, yet mostly and essentially the age was medieval, unscientific, superstitious, chivalrous, religious-minded, and backward in most respects. It was the life that Chaucer lived and wrote. Old things and new appear side by side in his poetry. What are these old things and new? The answer will be provided if we discuss the chief events and features of the age of Chaucer. Number 1. The 100 Years' War. The period between 1337 and 1453 is marked by a long war between France and England, which are collectively known as the 100 Years' War. Under the able and warlike guidance of King Edward III, England won a number of glorious victories, particularly at Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt. The war influenced English character in the following two ways. First, this war engendered among the English a strong feeling of national solidarity and patriotic fervor. Second, this war broke some social barriers between different classes of society. The victory for England was widely supported by the loyal archers whose feats with the bow were a force to reckon with. Froissart, the French chronicler referring to the English archers, says, "They let fly their arrows so wholly together and so thick that it seemed snow." The recognition of the services of the humble archers brought in a note of democratization in the country, and the age-old iron curtain between the nobility and the proletariat developed a few chinks. This was an advance from medievalism to modernism. Number 2. The age of chivalry. Nevertheless, the dawn of the modern era was yet far away. Compton Rickard observes, "Chaucer's England is still characteristically medieval, and nowhere is the conservative feeling more strongly marked than in the persistence of chivalry. This strange amalgam of love, war, and religion, so far from exhibiting any signs of decay, reached perhaps its fullest development at this time." The knight in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales is typical of his kind. Even the tale he narrates concerns the adventures of two true knights, Arcite and Palamon. Number 3. The Black Death. In the age of Chaucer, most people were victims of poverty, squalor, and pestilence. Even well-educated nobles eyed soap with suspicion, and learned physicians often forbade bathing as harmful for health. That is why England was often visited by epidemics, especially plague. The severest attack of this dread epidemic came in 1348. It was called the Black Death because black knotty boils appeared on the bodies of the hopeless victims. It is estimated that about a million human beings were swept away by this epidemic. That roughly makes 1/3 of the total population of England at that time. Number 4. Peasants' revolt and labor unrest. One immediate consequence of this pestilence was the acute shortage of working hands. The socio-economic system of England lay hopelessly paralyzed. Survived laborers started demanding much higher wages, but neither their employers nor the king nor parliament was ready to meet these demands. A number of severe regulations were passed asking workers to work at the old rates of payment. This occasioned a great deal of resentment, which culminated in the peasants' revolt in 1381 during the reign of Richard II. The peasants, groaning under the weight of injustice and undue official severity, were led to London by the Kentish priest John Bell. He preached the dignity of labor and asked the nobles, "When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman?" Chaucer, in his Nun's Priest's Tale, refer in the following lines to Jack Straw, who with Wade Taylor raised the banner of revolt. Certes he jacks straw and his man, knee made never shouts, half so shrill. R.K. Root thus sums up the significance of this uprising. This revolt, suppressed by the courage and good judgment of the boy king Richard II, exerted a lasting influence on the temper of the lower classes, fostering in them a spirit of independence. This was another line of progress towards modernism. Number 5. The Church. In the age of Chaucer, the Church became a hotbed of profligacy, corruption, and materialism. The overlord of the Church, namely the Pope of Rome, himself had ambitions and aptitudes other than spiritual. W. H. Hudson maintains in this connection of spiritual zeal and energy, very little was now left in the country. The greater prelates heaped up wealth and lived in a godless and worldly way. Well does Chaucer say in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, "If gold rust, what shall iron do?" Chaucer himself was indifferent to any reform, but his character sketches of the ecclesiastical figures in the Canterbury Tales leave no uncertainty regarding the corruption which had crept into the ecclesiastical rank and file. The round-bellied Epicurean monk, the merry and devil-may-care friar, and the unscrupulous pardoner are fairly typical of his age. Number 6. The Reform Movement. This widespread and deep-rooted corruption had already begun to provoke the attention of some reformists, the most prominent of whom was John Wycliffe, who has been called the morning star of the Reformation. He started what is called the Lollards movement. His aim was to eradicate the evil and corruption which had become a part and parcel of the church. He sent his poor priests to all parts of country for spreading his message of simplicity, purity, and austerity. His self-appointed task was to take Christianity back to its original purity and spirituality. He also wrote a number of tracts embodying his teaching. His translation of the Bible was, in the words of W. H. Hudson, the first translation of the scriptures into any modern vernacular tongue. That Chaucer was sympathetic to the Lollards movement is evident from the element of idealization which characterizes his portrait of the poor parson in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Number 7. Literary and intellectual tendencies. Latin and French were the dominant languages in 14th century England. The universities of Cambridge and Oxford employed Latin as the medium of instruction. Latin was also the language of the fashionable, who cultivated it as a social necessity. We recall here Chaucer's Sumner, who would speak no word but Latin after having drunk well. In another way too, the age of Chaucer stands between the medieval and the modern life. There was in this age some sort of a minor renaissance. The dawn of the real Renaissance in England was yet about 2 centuries ahead. Yet in the age of Chaucer, there are signs of growing influence of the ancients on native literature. Chaucer's own poetry was influenced by the Italian writer Boccaccio and Petrarch. The frameworks of Boccaccio's Decameron and of Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales are almost similar. It was through the work of the two above named Italian writers that humanism made its way into English intellectual culture. Conclusion. In the poetry of Chaucer, we can study the essential spirit both of the age that was passing and of the age that was to come. Though Chaucer transcends the limits of his generation and creates something which is of interest to the future generation too, yet he represents much of what his age stands for, and therein lies his greatness. Well does Compton Rickert observe, Chaucer's world is medieval, but beneath his medievalism, the leaven of the Renaissance is already at work. Today's quote is, "Patience is a conquering virtue," by Geoffrey Chaucer. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, please hit the like button, subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to get notified for my new videos. Take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.